Mike Brown. So this is going to be interesting. Let's bring in Jason Lloyd of The Athletic. Jason, I know you covered the Cleveland Cavaliers now. You covered the Cleveland Cavaliers when Mike Brown was there. And it's going to be an interesting few minutes for us because we just talked with Matt Barnes, who played for Mike in Los Angeles. And hey, he had it, he had a unique experience. I'm curious, what's your overall opinion on Mike Brown as a head coach?
So there's a lot to unpack with a simple question because I think Golden State drastically changed his style and his approach. And I'm really curious to see how he is. Obviously, I didn't hear what Matt had to say, but I've got a couple guesses because Mike, when he was here and when he was in LA, he was very much we're going to go until we get this right. And everything had to be perfect. And I mean, he had a 3-hour practice in Summer League in Vegas when he came back to Cleveland. And guys were like, are you kidding me? And like, let's back up for a second. So I haven't talked to him since the pandemic. Like I haven't talked to Mike in at least 2 years, but I know the experience at Golden State was really good for him. And in terms of a human, you will not find a better guy. He is a phenomenal dude, just in terms of character and just like, I've been around this league long enough to see the gamut from scumbags to pretty great dudes. And I would 100% put Mike in the pretty great dude category.
You really just covered the last couple of years of Kings coaches, so that's good.
So Mike, I talked to him when the Cavs and the Warriors were playing in the finals. I had a couple of really good conversations with him, and he pretty much said that like being there really was good for him and helped to lighten him up a little bit to where he doesn't take everything so seriously, and it doesn't have to be we're not leaving here until we get this right 3-hour practice. It doesn't always have to be that way. So I'm really kind of fascinated that this is the job he took because, I mean, everybody knows about the dysfunction in Sacramento. He's had opportunities before to get back into it. I don't know if he would ever do it again. He was very, very happy being Steve's assistant in Golden State. And like, his name came up in the Ohio State coaching search when Thad Matta stepped down. And I remember like texting going, there's no way you're taking that job. He's like, no, like he was loving life. And so of all the jobs to take, it really surprised me that this is the one that struck his, whatever to want to make him a head coach again. But I think he would be really good. X's and O's wise, you won't find a better coach. Like he's fantastic in terms of X's and O's. He struggled at times relating, I think, to players. And like I said, the 3-hour practices, whatever else, and we're going to be here until we get it right. Turned off a lot of guys, I think. And so that's where I think being in that warrior culture will really, really help him. And I'm really curious to see now what kind of coach he is, given what he already knows about the game, combined with, I think, the relaxing atmosphere of Golden State and how that wears off on him.
Yeah. So it's so fascinating that you would, have that type of outlook on it, because that's one of the good things about, going to different places and being under different coaches and things of that nature is you get to maybe see some of the flaws in what you did the first time and say, hey, I'm not going to incorporate that this time. What is like some of Mike's core beliefs essentially as a coach that even time in Golden State isn't going to change? Like, this is who he is.
He is a defensive-minded coach. He's going to win on the defensive end. He's always been that way. And like, listen, I'm not going to pretend to be a basketball expert. I know enough. I know what I'm looking at, and I know enough about the game to cover it. But we had conversations in Vegas when he came back to coach the Cavs the second time. We were sitting there in Mandalay Bay or something, and he was diagramming plays with like salt shakers and napkin dispensers with me. And like, okay, when this happens and this does this and this goes over here, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, you got to back up. You lost me. And he'd back it up and he'd show me again. I'm like, no, you got to do it again. You lost me. Like his mind is very much a defensive mind. And I don't see that changing at all. And he says things like they have to feel us on the defensive end. Like he wants to play a physical defensive style. And in terms of offense, I don't know. I don't know what he's going to run. Like he got screwed the second time around in Cleveland. He never should have got fired. He got 1 year. And Kyrie never really bought into him. And I think that was really complicated. Like Kyrie never really gave Mike a chance. And when your best player won't give you a chance, it's really hard for you to have success as a head coach, obviously. And, you know, Dan Gilbert made this big thing when they brought him back. He said it was a mistake in firing him, and he apologized. And they fired him again a year later. And so that never should have happened. He never should have got fired as fast as he did. The whole thing just fell apart in Cleveland. And it was unfortunate to see. But I think he'll do a great job. You got to give him time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing Sacramento doesn't seem to do with a lot of their coaches. And again, that's why I'm frankly shocked that of all the opportunities that he had to take over time, that this is the one he would take after he already dealt with a pretty dysfunctional organization in Cleveland.
He's coming to save us, Jason. That's what we have convinced ourselves.
If you give him enough time, he will turn it around.
Well, that's the problem. We don't have time, Jason. we don't have time. Like, it needs to happen now. Now.
Well, you know what's really funny is because I've seen that with Browns coaches. It's the same thing. Like, they want immediate. Like, they've been through it for so long that they want immediate. They want, you have to do it now. Do it right now, or we don't believe in you. And that's, you know, a lot of times coaches wind up paying the sins for their predecessors. I've seen it time and time again. Doesn't matter the sport. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just saying, like, if they'll be patient with him, and you got to give him players. Obviously, any coach is only as good as his players. He can do a terrific job as an NBA head coach. I absolutely believe that.
You mentioned Mike's focus on defense, and I think that's one thing that's come up a lot over the last week or so since we saw Mike Brown was, a finalist here. Not just his attention to defense, but perhaps maybe, is it fair to say there was a struggle on the offensive end, or is it a lack of attention on the offensive end? Like, what was really the disconnect, if there was one, with Mike Brown and offense?
Yeah, he probably could use an offensive coordinator type on his staff. Certainly when he was here, he could use that. And again, that's where that I'm really curious to see his staff that he builds, and who he brings with him. If he brings anyone from Golden State, obviously the Warriors know how to put the ball in the basket, and who will come, if anyone, from that, if he'll go back to his Cleveland roots to assemble a staff. Yeah, I mean, some of his teams struggle to score. There's no question about it. He had a really young LeBron his first time around, and a lot of times it was just give to LeBron and get out of his way. He's one of the greatest of all time. Let him go figure it out. And then obviously he had Kobe in L.A., so he's had some superstar, game-changing type players. And, I'm talking through this in real time with you guys. It's funny because I just saw Mike Longobardi over the weekend, Kings assistant coach. And that's sort of his strength is defense. And Mike's family still lives here, still lives in Cleveland. And I happened to bump into him. We happen to live in the same city, and I bumped into him just over the weekend at a restaurant. And he was saying, like, we got to see who the coach is first and see if he'll be back on staff or not. And that is Mike's strength, is defensive coaching. So I don't know what that means for Mike's future. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of an offensive coach, yeah, I think that he could use someone to help him on the offensive side. And again, that's where that Warriors impact. I'm interested to see how that carries over.
Yeah, Mike gonna have scores like Ohio State football. That's what the score's gonna be looking like.
Jason,
now, when they brought him back to Cleveland, they brought him back with the idea, like Byron Scott. When Byron was here, they were just terrific defensively. And Mike made this. It was a young team, and he made them better. They improved on the defensive end. They improved across the board, really. I think they won 9 more games, but that was the year before LeBron was going to be a free agent, and it was very much an expectation of playoffs or bust that year, and they didn't make the playoffs, and it looked like a disaster of a season when, in reality, they improved dramatically over they were the year before he arrived. It just wasn't enough to satisfy ownership.
That first year in that his return to Cleveland was playoffs or bust?
Yes. Because you got to remember, okay, so like I wrote a whole book on that. So I'll boil the whole thing down to like 30 seconds. They spent 4 years trying to reshape the roster and get them in a position for LeBron to come back. And the first 3 years were with Byron. and they were awful defensively. And I loved Byron. I had a great relationship with Byron, but they were horrific defensively. And Dan Gilbert was very much a defensive-minded coach, and he always regretted firing Mike. So they went out and they in free agency. They brought in Jarrett Jack. They brought in Earl Clark and someone else. I don't remember. Oh, Bynum, Andrew Bynum thing. And it was very much they felt like they had to make the playoffs to try and entice LeBron to come back. And they were awful those first 3 years. And it was by design. Like they were trying to accumulate trade assets and high draft picks, and they wanted to build a roster that would be appealing to LeBron. And it was a disaster. In that fourth year, there was a ton of pressure on the organization. Everybody knew it was at stake. It didn't work out. The GM got fired, who's actually one of Mike's best friends. Chris Grant, the old Cavs GM, is one of Mike's closest friends. And Chris got fired, and then Mike got fired after the season. And then the funny thing is LeBron wound up coming back anyway. And had they just stayed patient, the plan actually worked. But they just got impatient and fired everybody and swept everybody out. And it ended fine. Like, David Griffin came on as Cavs GM. He used all the assets that Chris acquired, traded for J.R. Smith, sort of reshaped the roster, traded for Kevin Love, and the Cavs got the championship out of it after all. But it's just unfortunate that it looks like a stain on Mike's record when really he did the job that he was asked to come in and do. They just didn't make as big enough of a leap for him to save his job.
Well, good thing Mike coaches for an organization that's much more patient now. So we're all in a better place.
I'm telling you, man, that was the most surprising thing about it. Of all the, because I know there are other teams that were interested in him over the last few years. Of all the teams to jump back in on, he basically jumped back into a situation very similar to what he had in Cleveland. That surprised me.
He's going to right the wrong.
Now we need wins now.
Tremendous insight, Jason. Can't thank you enough, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Good luck with him.
All right.